a real face. So I just started the recording, and I am happy to pass the baton to our guest. Todd, please take us away.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. So good evening, I guess, or late afternoon for some of you guys on the West Coast, right? So we're here to talk about story mapping and its ability to help you really understand what could be your minimum viable product. Thought I'd take a quick minute to introduce myself. I haven't always been an Agile coach. I've actually started in the early to mid 90s. I installed token ring networks and configured Novell servers, if you guys remember that. Spent about 15 years as a developer and an architect. And probably around 2012, 2013, I had a little bit of a career pivot where I realized helping people understand what problems needed to be solved was more interesting than solving those problems using code. And I became an Agile coach and have been doing that ever since. All right, so let's talk a little bit about MVP before we talk about story mapping, right? And this is one of my absolute favorite talks that I give. I wrote this a few years ago when I really wanted to start learning more about product management. And I decided to apply lean agile principles to the process of building a working arcade. And a lot of times when we're in person, I see people kind of give me this strange look about, we talk software delivery, and here I am talking about building an arcade. But this is really appropriate because you see, most everything I know about product management and working with a product backlog, I learned playing the game Asteroids. And I might be dating myself a little bit here with this game. But you see, when the game first starts, you're surrounded by these large, slow-moving boulders. And when you first start playing, you want quick wins, right? So you shoot all the big boulders. They start to turn into medium-sized boulders. You keep shooting them, and eventually you have all of these small, fast-moving boulders everywhere, and you meet your demise. But quickly, you learn that if you really want to set a high score, what you have to do is you shoot one large boulder, and then you start picking off the offshoots from that large boulder until it's gone, and then you go after the second large boulder, and so forth. And it's the same thing for organizations, right? When you get ready to kick off a brand new product or project, a lot of times there's pressure to try and decompose the entire project into user stories. And a lot of times they become very technical in nature. And the goal is simply to say, hey, when are we going to be finished, right? And a lot of times what happens is we run, we start getting close to that end date, and we start cutting features wholesale in the spirit of delivering an MVP. But as organizations start to mature, just like kids learning Asteroids, what they really discover is if you want to be fast, what you really have to do is maximize the value that you deliver with each iteration and with any of the work that you're doing, right? The goal is to only decompose the features that are really critical and only to define how much of that feature needs to be delivered to have some value. We would obviously want to capture all of these ideas, and you want to make sure that they're in your backlog, but you don't refine all of them, and you certainly don't try and deliver everything at the same time. So let's talk about a couple of words that I'm going to use, and just so we're all on the same page, right? So user story or a product backlog item might be a ticket if you're used to using Jira, right? But ultimately what we're talking about when I say a user story is a single behavior, usually expressed from the perspective of an end user. When you hear me talk about a feature, right, what we're really just talking about is kind of affinity mapping of user stories, right? It's a collection of these user stories that support a single aspect of that initiative. And this one here is where sometimes it can be a little bit controversial, right? The term minimum viable product was actually introduced by a gentleman named Eric Ries in a book called The Lean Startup. And what it really means is a deployment that has the least amount of work required to start answering questions about our customers or validating assumptions that we are making, right? But a lot of organizations use the term MVP to mean that initial release to production. So in that case, you can call these things proof of concepts. I really like radical assumptions to test, or a RAT. The other two big things: minimum marketable feature. So here I want you to think about a term called the Pareto principle. Basically, the concept is 80% of your users are going to take advantage of about 20% of the features that you release. So if we can really start honing in and identifying what is that 20%, that's how you get to go much, much faster. A minimum marketable product is simply the first release of all of these features that we've developed, and the minimum amount of each of those. All right, so every user story that you guys deliver really needs to start as some form of an objective, right? And I use objective intentionally, right? I'm sure you guys have heard of the modern day movement called objectives and key results. It's a great way of gaining alignment. But regardless of where your goals originate from, they ultimately need to be decomposed into stories and things that can ultimately be delivered. So at the start of this talk, I mentioned that I wrote this talk around building an arcade for my family. So I thought I would have a quick conversation with you guys about how it is we decided, even in the first place, we wanted to build this arcade, right? So we knew we wanted to improve the experience of our game room. And our game room at the time was our dining room table and a hope chest with a bunch of party games and some board games in it. So talking about improving the experience was not like a big, difficult ask. But being a hobbyist woodworker, we talked about it. We decided we were going to build this big arcade. But I wanted to do think about lean, agile principles, really focusing on this idea of MVP and how I might deliver that. So we started thinking about all of the components that go into an arcade, right? So this is going to be, I don't have the hardware, so we got to run some kind of emulator. I got to think about the user interface and how they're going to play the games. Some games require a horizontal scrolling configuration. Some are vertical scrollers. We mentioned before we wanted to have some kind of storage built into this. So what is that cabinet going to look like? So you can see we had these big features that we really needed to start thinking about and decomposing, but we didn't want to do a whole lot of work. So we started thinking about the emulator. And when you think about it, right, there's a lot of different things you can run today on modern computers, right? I can run Atari and Intellivision and Nintendo, game system along with 8-bit arcade games. For the purpose of our MVP, we decided we were going to focus on 8-bit arcade games, because what I really wanted to find out was whether or not my kids would be interested in playing these games from the 80s, given what they had exposure to. So we took a Raspberry Pi, installed RetroPie on it, downloaded a package of arcade games, and had that installed. As far as the user interface, right, we had a big choice here. We could start thinking about building out a custom user interface with wiring, or we could plug in a USB Xbox controller, and at least now we have something quick and simple and easy to use to play. And of course, just like any software delivery project, sometimes there are big decisions that need to be made that will be very expensive if the decision is not made well in the beginning. For us, that really had to do with how are we going to orient the TV and what was the cabinet going to look like, right? Because if I build a big cabinet with a vertical scrolling TV and it turns out that we prefer to play horizontally scrolling arcade games, that would be an extremely difficult change to the underlying architecture, if you will. And then we also had experiments that we wanted to run on the kids, right? Would our kids stand up to play arcade games, or should we think about making one that was cocktail table where they could sit down? That was some of these big questions. So, as I mentioned before, we took RetroPie, installed it onto a Raspberry Pi controller, plugged in a USB controller, plugged it into our television, and with almost no money and very little time, we had an MVP that allowed us to start running experiments against our kids and get lots of answers. And this is one of the powers of having a real MVP. So as an example, we discovered that our kids did enjoy playing 8-bit arcade games, right? Donkey Kong was really popular, all the Pac-Mans. But it turns out that the Mario Brothers smash-up game was absolutely their favorite. So in the end, what we really discovered was, in addition to the arcade, I also needed to have a Nintendo game system set up. Definitely needed to have a horizontally oriented monitor, because the kids wanted to play horizontal scrollers. And out of that, we were able to define what our beta release would look like. And there you go, our beta release. Again, when you think about approaching a software development project, keeping variability in mind at all times is paramount, right? So you can see we laid out the basic infrastructure, but at the end of the day, I still have a USB controller if 2 people want to play a game. I didn't invest a lot of money into creating this user interface because I still had more things to learn. But I was able to make educated decisions around what is the basic structure of my cabinet, and how am I going to orient my TV. So you can see how even subsequent releases might not necessarily be viable in the marketplace. I can't imagine any customer in their right mind is going to say, oh my God, this is the arcade that I need in my house, let me buy it. But I also learned how to manage an arcade, as an example. How do I reset the high scores when my kids beat me on these different arcade games? And there's a lot of learning that takes place. And this is a big value to having releases early and often. Here is an example of our minimum marketable product, right? In the end, we ultimately built a nice user interface, really got things painted up, had something presentable. The big thing that we discovered using our beta release was the fact that we really enjoyed playing Golden Tee, and that required that we install a roller ball in the middle of our user interface. Had I gone straight to the point where I said, oh, we're just going to create a Nintendo-like controller, I might have missed out on the opportunity to play other games and expand the system. So taking advantage of those beta releases was absolutely huge. When we talk about minimum marketable feature, the things I want you guys to keep in mind, right, is you can constantly have releases. So if you looked at our beta release, we had no doors on our cabinets. So that minimum marketable feature required we only put our doors on. And then slowly but surely, they got painted, ultimately decorated, and delivered. So the purpose of this call, or this session today, was not to talk about necessarily my arcade, but what I wanted to seed you guys with is this idea of minimum viable product. And as you go through it, the idea that you have to be ruthless in deciding what not to do. I don't remember off the top of my head whose quote this is exactly, but something along the lines of value is not realized by what you add, but by what you take away. And when you're talking about MVP, it's really important that you have a conscious plan upfront about what it is you need to discover and learn about your users, so that you can prioritize the correct user stories to help with that. So with that said, what we are really here to do today is to play a little bit of a game around user story mapping. My goal is to make sure that you guys are empowered to be able to facilitate one of these exercises and games with your organization and explore whether this is a technique that works for you guys in delivering an MVP. So, story mapping. What is the goal of this game? Now, I'm going to say one thing. I don't know exactly how many people we have on the call, but I believe it is well over 40 at this point in time. Normally, I play this game extremely interactive with everyone on the call. With 40 people, I'm not exactly sure we're going to be able to do that. I will encourage you guys to take yourself off of mute. You are welcome to shout out some ideas and help interact. If you would like to play along at home, all you need is an A4 piece of paper and a pen, and we will kind of work this together. So what we're going to talk about is this epic that we want to deliver, which is helping people get ready for work in the morning. And the reason why I chose this particular topic is it's something common to everyone. When you're playing a game, you want to make sure everyone can relate to the topic at hand. But more importantly, it has nothing to do with anything we do at work. A lot of times when you're introducing a new concept to people and you try and make it a little bit too much related to their day-to-day job, you can get a little caught up in the axle with, well, that's not really going to ever happen in our experience, or, hey, that's not a well-crafted story. So keeping it something light that everyone can relate to is a great idea. So with that said, I am going to change my screen. All right, this is what a story map looks like when it is empty and brand new. The top talks about what is it we're trying to map. And every story map has a journey associated with it, right? So the trigger is the first step of our journey. The value defined is the last step of our journey, and the story map will talk about everything that takes place in the middle. You have two different ways that you can start thinking about a story map. I'm going to scroll in here. Some people really understand the features and the concepts that they're trying to work on, and they can start from features and decompose them into steps. For other groups, it's beneficial to start talking about the steps that you're going to take and then do affinity mapping to define those features. So if you think about this, right, we want to really, understand what it means to get ready to go to work. I'm going to go ahead. What would you guys think might be some features related to trying to get out of your house and head to work in the morning?
Personal hygiene would be one.
Hygiene, absolutely. What else?
Coffee. I cannot imagine a day started without a cup of coffee.
Right, coffee, absolutely. That might be a little bit too specific to be a feature, but what would you, consider that act of getting coffee in the morning, maybe eating breakfast?
Yeah. Some food intake.
Food intake, I love it. Awesome. What else?
You got to get dressed.
You got to get dressed for sure. Absolutely. Anyone think of anything else?
Take the dogs out.
Take the dogs out. Absolutely, right? So I took the liberty knowing we're going to have a large number of people on this call, and I created a couple of different features, right? So, hey, you got to wake up and actually get out of bed. Someone mentioned before about hygiene, right? Maybe getting ready, hygiene, bathroom routine. Again, it's the words you use are not what's important. It's making sure that when you facilitate this exercise with your group, that everyone agrees and understands what that means, right? It's really important that you guys start to create this ubiquitous language. Now, when you're talking about story mapping, we have 40 some odd people on this call. To me, the magic number is somewhere in that 6 to 8 people, and you got to get a diverse perspective. You want people who represent and have direct contact with customers. You're going to want to have engineering folks. You're going to want to have, business stakeholders, potentially testers on there. So when you hear me talk about a ubiquitous language, is we want to all be able to talk the same way. So whether it's someone representing the business, someone representing IT, we use the same words and they ultimately mean the same things. All right, help me out here. User, what are some of the activities that I might need to do if I wanted to wake up in the morning, as an example? What kind of activities might that cover?
Set the alarm.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Set the alarm.
Set the alarm? Absolutely. Or, well, the alarm just went off. You mean like turn it off?
Right. Turn off the alarm.
Unless you're starting your planning before you go to bed.
Perfect. What else?
Stretch.
Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta make up your bed.
Well, you first have to get out of bed.
Rise your eyes open.
You said pry your eyes open?
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else can think of anything they want to add?
Brush your
Alright.
teeth.
I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
I said, brush your teeth.
Yep. So now that's us waking up, getting ready. We're going to talk about maybe bathroom routines, and someone just said brushing teeth.
Mhm.
What else might you do when you're getting ready in the morning in the bathroom?
Leave
Take a shower.
Go to the bathroom.
I took her to take a shower, and someone said go to the bathroom.
Yeah, leave the bedroom and go to the bathroom.
Get dressed.
How about some morning reflection
Ooh.
Like it.
and also the news, which makes you reflect, usually in the wrong way.
I
Floss.
could get dressed.
Review the schedule for the day. Just go over your calendar for the day.
Perfect. And I will tell you, one of the things that I absolutely appreciate is being explicit. When you guys facilitate an exercise like this with your groups, right? The reason why we invite a whole diverse set of people is we want different perspectives, right? Some people might have a dog, some people might have a cat, someone else might have a fish. It's not feed your pets, it's feed your dog, feed your cat, feed your fish, because they all have different requirements behind them. And when we start thinking about the things we don't have to do, there might be different exceptions and liberties we can take depending on the pet in question as an example. What else might we do in getting ready, right? We got brush teeth, take a shower, go to the bathroom, morning reflection, get dressed, review schedule. Anything else? Well, I live here in the Northeast. So for me, I got to feed the stove because we heat the house with wood. So that is part of my morning routine.
Sort the kids out.
You said throw the kids out?
Oh yeah, throw them out. Yeah, I said sort them out, but yeah, throw them out.
Oh,
Is better.
sort the kids out. Absolutely, right? What about when it comes time to make breakfast or eat your meal, right? What might we be doing there? How would you go about making sure breakfast is ready? Go ahead, Veronica. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just.
Fry some eggs.
Perfect. Fry up some eggs.
Toast English muffins.
Make toast. What else?
Get the juice
Brew
out.
coffee.
Juice.
drink water, enough.
Hey, where's the coffee? I don't see any coffee up there.
There we go, make coffee. It's there now.
Should have been back at wake up, like it ready, part of that routine.
Absolutely, right? And these, while we're half joking, these are the reason why we have conversations, is while we're also talking about what are all the steps in the journey? How do people actually accomplish their outcome? We're talking about order of things that happen. Hey, there is no way I am going to be ready to sort the kids out if I haven't had a cup of coffee. So the timeline is way off. And there's no right or wrongs in these. You got to really get people to be willing to speak in and share. All right. What about packing up? What might that involve?
Finding your badge. Packing your badge.
You know, finding your badge. I heard pack your bag.
Disconnect the car from a charger.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Grab your cell phone and your keys.
No, and one of my favorite things is anytime you hear the word "and," there's a very good chance you have two separate ideas. And again, because think about it, I might we'll get your keys.
Get your umbrella.
Check weather, because you might need to get your umbrella. What else?
I'm checking my backpack or my wallet to make sure I have everything.
You may pack your laptop.
Yeah, it would be horrible if you grabbed your bag, but you didn't have your laptop, right? Perfect. All right. So we have a bunch of activities that we would do in the morning, assuming we woke up on time and we had all the luxury in the world. My question for you guys would be, if I challenged you to figure out what would you do if you only had 15 minutes in the morning before you left? So looking at wake up, right? Turn off the alarm. Would you still turn off the alarm if you only had 15 minutes?
Yes.
Absolutely.
The alarm probably didn't work.
But well, my
I don't
alarm
think
might
it would
not
be
have worked.
important.
That is absolutely correct. If you think it didn't work now, wait till we get to release 3. All right. So what about getting out of bed? I think that's probably a given. We still have to do that. If you only had 15 minutes to get to work, would you stretch?
No.
Right. And what about making the bed?
No.
Right. I heard no there. Probably not. Pry your eyes open. I think that's probably a given. That's a must do there. Right. What about getting ready? All right. Brushing teeth.
Yes.
You know, I hear a couple
Yes.
people say yes. I see some
Yeah.
nods. So we'll pull that one down. What about taking a shower?
Yes.
I see some
Oop.
yeses still. Okay. Hey, listen, if you can take a shower in 15 minutes, I think it's awesome. Go to the bathroom.
Yes.
You know. Morning reflection.
No.
Yeah, I probably don't have time for that. Get dressed.
Yes.
Nice. But let me ask you a question, right? And have you guys ever had that situation where in the morning you're like, oh my God, I only have 15 minutes, and you just grab the top clothes in each pile, and then you get to work and you look at yourself and you go, oh my God, this does not match. How did this possibly happen, right? Those are things you got to think about. What could you do to try and prevent that from happening, right? If you know that there's a chance your alarm might not work, or that you have a tendency to sleep through your alarm, and getting dressed is one of those things that is a little bit time consuming. What could you do to potentially shorten that?
Go to bed dressed.
You should go to bed dressed, right? I was
bet it-
thinking you could pick your clothes out the night before,
Mhm.
so that no matter what, you have a good outfit to wear. And when you guys are facilitating this game with folks at work, right? These are the conversations that you really have to have, is force people to think about what they don't need to do. What about reviewing the schedule? Would you review your schedule if you only had 15 minutes?
Night before.
I
Night
think the night
before.
before is better, yeah.
What about feed the stove? If I only have 15 minutes, I think I still have to feed the stove because it gets really cold if you don't. And then last but not least was sort out the kids.
I'll do that.
Probably have to do that anyways. Going across, we'll go a little bit quicker on this one. Breakfast. If you only had 15 minutes, would you fry eggs and make toast?
No,
No,
Would you drink juice?
Possibly.
No.
maybe.
And would you make coffee?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Maybe.
coffee.
Right?
Morning
And once
drive.
again, if we know that there's a chance that we might oversleep or our alarm won't work, what can we do to make sure that coffee is possible with 15 minutes?
You said it the night before.
Maybe even splurge and, excuse me, buy yourself one of those coffee machines that you can time it so that your alarm is really the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen. All right, packing up, finding your badge. Probably need to make sure if you got to go to your work, pack your bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Disconnect the car from the charger. It would be interesting to see what would happen if you didn't. Get cell phone. What do you guys think?
yes,
Get your keys.
Mhm.
yes,
Check the weather.
no,
Mm,
Eh,
Probably not. Check to make sure you have your wallet.
mm.
yes,
Excellent. And then pack your laptop.
yes.
So pre-packing the night before would be good.
Yes, and this is why these questions are so important, right? Because the next question is, what happens if you really sleep through your alarm and holy cow, you've only got 5 minutes to walk out the door? And the reason why I love this particular scenario is you get some people that are thinking very, very creative about how could I get out the door intentionally in 5 minutes. So as an example, if you had 5 minutes, would you still turn off your alarm?
It's
I
not
think I
gonna
heard
go
someone say
off.
yes.
It doesn't go off if you overslept, right? I don't
Well,
know.
maybe you just
It's an
hit
alarm,
snooze
but
so
it
many
just seems
times.
a not important thing.
Right. Yeah, but it could also be that you just hit snooze so many times that you're now down to 5 minutes.
Possibly that too,
nope.
yeah.
Get out of bed. I think that's and pry your eyes open.
Mhm.
Those are probably the minimum amount, right? So now we're talking about within the feature of wake up, you can see 3 releases: minimum marketable feature, another release, and then a third release. What about in get ready? What would you not do here? Would you brush your teeth?
Yes.
Got it. So let me ask you guys a question. Have you ever gone somewhere with your toothbrush and brushed your teeth once you got there?
Yes.
Right? So if I got 5 minutes to go out the door, maybe I'm grabbing my toothbrush and I'm brushing my teeth in the office. I only got 5 minutes. And what about take a shower?
No.
Stick
skip
your
it.
head under the sink, get your hair wet, comb it, right? Kind of make it look like you took a shower. What about going to the bathroom?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard one to avoid, right? Getting dressed, I think that would
Yes.
be really uncomfortable if you chose to wait until you got to the office for that one. Feeding if I got 5 minutes, I'm screaming to my wife, hey, throw some wood in the stove, I'm out the door, right? What about sorting the kids out?
Look for alternatives, maybe a neighbor can drop.
Yeah, hey, listen, hope maybe your 5-year-old can feed the 3-year-old and you can get out the door on time. But there's not always feasible solutions to every problem, but you owe it to yourself and the organization and the product as a whole to have those conversations, right? I was joking around with someone, I ran this exercise with them, and instead of saying get dressed, he had actually said, put your left leg in the pants, put your right leg in the pants. And we were all laughing. And I said, while it sounds a little bit silly to say, put your right leg in the pants before just jumping into them, think about it in terms of experimentation. Maybe you discovered that you gained weight since the last time you put on those pants. And by trying to put your right leg in, you discover the pants are too small, or you lost weight and the pants are just going to be really large. So there is great value in being extremely explicit in these things, right? It's not sort out the kids. It's get the kids dressed. Well, maybe I start picking the kids' outfits out the night before. Feed the kids. Hey, we're going to adopt a Montessori philosophy. And at 3 years old, I'm handing my kids a butcher's knife and telling him to make his own breakfast. But these are just through that conversation, really help you discover what it is that your product ultimately needs to be. For breakfast, are you making coffee still?
No.
Yeah, but probably not. Hopefully they have coffee at the office. It might really stink to have to drive there without the coffee. But again, if you're really smart or not, if you have the ability to have one of those machines with a timer, it might be free to have your coffee in the morning because we do prep work in advance. And all of these thought processes about how we could make this step possible in a quicker time frame will help you, again, discover a much better product. Finding your badge. You doing that?
Mhm.
Yeah, I see. If you can't get into the office, and again, thinking about things like, hey, if I pack my bag, find my badge, and make sure my wallet is with it and my laptop is there, and all of these things are happening ahead of time, then I am in a great situation to be able to get these done in a short amount of time. But as I said, one of the big things you guys really have to drive home when you're playing this game or doing an exercise like this with folks at your organization is the value is the conversations that you guys have. For this first line up here, there is a game. I don't know if you guys have ever heard. There's a book called Innovation Games by Luke Hokeman, and he has a game called Build Them a Hot Tub. Where literally the goal is for this top row here, this is not the final product. This is everything you could possibly think of that people might want. And then you start removing them one at a time. Do we need this immediately? No. Can I get away with it doing it in 6 months? Can I wait a year to do it, etc.? So slowly answering those questions and ultimately discovering what your MVP is. So with that said, I'm going to open it up.
Question. Can I ask you a question?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I was about to do.
I think I mean, this is such a good visual. I think it's interesting that nowhere along the line of that exercise did we add more detail. Like you were just talking about how, and of course, all of these could be broken down into smaller tasks, but this whole entire exercise, we started with the user journey step. And then when we went deeper, so, you're so used to building out a story or adding more detail as you go along, but this exercise had none of that. We just stuck.
That was an awesome observation. And here is the big thing to take away is the titles of your stories should be descriptive enough that anyone reading the title will have a understanding of what the outcome is. They might not know the details. Oh, do you eat your eggs over easy, sunny side up, scrambled? I don't really care. I know I'm going to have to fry eggs, and they all take about the same amount of time, right? And so if you have good descriptive titles that describe an outcome, both your business users and stakeholders understand it, the delivery team understands it. For those of you who might practice something like SAFE, where you try and do forecasting out into the future, I don't need details to start sizing these user stories. Frying eggs relative to making toast, which one's larger and smaller, right? You get to have these conversations and you don't get bogged down in the details of how I'm going to solve the problem. That comes through refinement and further discussion. This is very, very early in the process. I love axioms. If you ever get an opportunity to work with me or have conversations, you will learn that, right? But there is nothing more wasteful than efficiently building that which should never have been built in the first place, is one of my absolute favorite quotes. And this is what we're trying to discover, is what should we not be building? Because that is speed, right? If you ever read the book, Twice the Work in Half the Time, or right, it's really twice the value in half the time, because we're constantly focusing on the most important scenario that's going to drive the most immediate value to the largest number of people. And as long as you're constantly thinking about value add as opposed to the tasks underneath, it's hard to go the wrong way. Anyone else? Nice. Okay, so here's something I'm gonna wrap it up with one small thing, right? This was a rather large group, and if you guys are interested in maybe hearing more about other forms of interactive training exercises, feel free to reach out. I'll make sure that Sasha has my LinkedIn details. I think it might also be in the meeting invite. I'm always open and happy to have these conversations with anyone at any point in time. I appreciate everyone's time.
So I just had a question.
Sure.
How often do you do this exercise? I mean, is it once a quarter? You possibly can't do it for every sprint, right?
So this is not a sprint planning exercise. Any large product you want to kick off, I would start with something like this. If someone comes to you with a brand new feature that you've never thought about, I might decompose the individual feature using this. So it's not a cadenced event. It is more with how frequently do you get these new ideas coming in. As a development team, the easiest thing people do is write code. The hardest thing we do as an organization is think about what needs to be built and how would be the right approach. And this is really an initial kickoff step more than getting into the nitty-gritty details.
Sure, yeah. I love the code that you mentioned. Is the most wasteful thing is to build something efficiently which is not required.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if we have other developers on this call. I, to this day, suffer from PSD about how many times I've spent years working on a piece of software only to see it never actually get released into production or used once or twice and then scrapped, and you go, oh my God, that that was
Right.
many family dinners that I missed.
Right.
And that's really what we're trying to avoid, is making sure as developers, as testers, as stakeholders, we all feel purpose driven because we understand how this story relates to the bigger picture and will deliver what it is that the customer needs, more so than just what we think they want.
Makes sense. So the other follow-up question I had was, I don't want to take up too much of bandwidth, but I just wanted to clarify a few things, is because I thought this was really interesting exercise you did, even though I didn't really participate. Who typically initiates this, right? I mean, I can see the product managers could do it, or is this, the first question is, I mean, can architects do it? Can certain, because they have to involve certain stakeholders in it to be effective, right? Because your idea is to get the diverse set of people who can give you inputs on different aspects of the organization, right?
Correct. So I would encourage you. So my magic number is 6 to 8 people. For sure, you have to have product management, right? You need people with direct access to customers because we're talking about a customer's journey. Now, you can invite architects. I encourage you to invite architects and developers and testers from the teams. They're not there, though, as an architect or as a developer. They're there to say, hey, I've got experience working with our product. I've got domain knowledge and I understand what's happening, because you don't want a situation where they start talking about, well, in the wake up feature, I would build this API and I would architect. Now you're starting to get into the implementation details. And as I
Right.
mentioned before, we definitely want to keep it above that, so we're speaking the language of the business.
Exactly. And that's what was my follow-up question was, they almost have to know what this exercise entails, right? And someone almost have to guide through. If someone's getting into too much of weeds, then we need to pull that out and we need to stop right there. So someone almost have to guide it, this process through, right?
Yeah, definitely requires a facilitator. And this is why I love this particular game and with this particular scenario is if you're interested in introducing user story mapping to your organization, play this game with them and do it interactive, right? Hey, 5 minutes of silent brainstorming where everyone thinks of all the steps that they have. Do your affinity mapping exercise to define your features, then go through and be ruthless in deciding what can wait. Hey, what's our 2-year plan? What's our 18-month plan? What's our 12-month plan? What's our 6-month plan? Whatever number fits for you guys, for sure.
Right. So the output of this exercise is typically a roadmap then?
Yes, absolutely. Here is my minimum marketable product. Here is my second release. Here is my third and final release.
Right. Great. Well, thanks. That was interesting. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Sweet. If there are no other questions, Sasha, I'm going to turn the group back over to you.
Thank you. That was really, really impressive. I've seen this game before, but I think what you did is you put some really nice flavor to that. Thank you so much for presenting. And I saw that a request in the chat if people could have access to your mural. Would you feel comfortable to share the link with the crowd?
Oh, to the mural board? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a good
I will
talk.
share it with you,
Todd.
Sasha, and you can share it with the whole group.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to put this in the comments for the meetup group. So please email me the link, and I will share this with the crowd. Your LinkedIn profile is in the meetup invitation. So as far as I understand, Todd welcomes your connections at LinkedIn. So let's do that. It's always nice to get connected. Any more questions for us before we thank Todd and wrap it up? Going once, going twice. Let me
Pretty quickly, a quick question. This application, the app.mural.co, is for doing exercises similar to this kind of stories, etc.
Sorry, Rene, you are not very audible. May you please repeat the question?
Yeah, I saw the board. I can see that the website is app.mural.co. Is that a kind of application which
Yes.
is helping us to practice this?
So Mural and Miro is another one. It's just a virtual whiteboard and collaboration tool. I use it because the company I work for, that's our collaboration tool of choice, but it's not much different than a whiteboard if you use Teams as an example. It's just something to share with. And allows more than one person to interact with it at the same time. That's the real power of Mural.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You could actually visit the existing boards If you have, as a visitor, you don't have to set up an account.
Correct.
And it also allows you to set up your own account and use it for free with a lot of limitations. Or the first level of paid accounts, I believe it's about $130 per year. So not very expensive. Any more questions, folks?
Yeah, I have a question. Let's say if you have the MVP already, and after that you are going to experiment because you are asking for user feedback.
Mhm.
What's the purpose of the roadmap? Because the roadmap has everything, like everything that you plan for this. But if you are going to be experimenting everything, that means your roadmap is useless, right?
So the roadmap is not chiseled in stone. This is how you have to deliver it. I'm a firm believer that the real value is forcing the conversations around what's important so that you run experiments, you get your user feedback. Now it's not just oh, users said they would rather have X. It's, well, what's the opportunity cost that I lose chasing what the customer wants, right? So having that plan in place, again, a great axiom. You can't respond to change if you don't have a plan to change. And that's the value of the roadmap is that we get to see how decisions impact what we thought was going to happen. And regardless, you still have a general idea of what it is you're trying to build. It can't be just experimentation without any controlled variables involved. But I would agree that if you do not do this and look at it like a Gantt chart, right? This is not intended to replace that, hey, I've come up with a new way of telling you when I will finish everything. It's really about prioritization more than anything.
Transparency
I
and
have a quick
special
question.
adaptation.
I have a quick question. So, I mean, this is a good example, but for applications that have different user personas, how do you introduce that into this technique?
Yeah, I would probably do a map per major persona because it really is the user journey that we're talking about. And now you can look for the common steps that both things take, and that will definitely influence the prioritization. But if you have an admin user and you have a regular user and they have very, very different expectations of how the application will behave, you need to do a separate map for each. Or I would recommend you do a separate map for each.
I have a question. Do you have any advice working with teams from UX experience? Because them try to over-investigate because they need to understand each part of the customer, of the journey, and sometimes they make difficult to think in MVPs.
Right. So I have worked. So there's this concept of lean UX. What we just talked about is a form of lean agile development. Lean UX takes those same kind of concepts. They have to embrace experimentation as much as anyone else. When it comes to this conversation, I would hope that they really understand how the user wants to accomplish the outcome, not necessarily getting focused on what does the UI look like. Here is their opportunity to start thinking about things like information architecture. If I can see the big picture of what that journey looks like, and I can see what my MVP is going to look like, that will definitely help inform some of those things. And it also depends on how your organization views UX. I have worked in a number of places where UX is really just UI design, and they don't think about all the other things that happen under the covers, right? Once again, I go back to the output that we create as a delivery team is the easiest part of our job. It is all the forethought that goes into making it as easy as possible to write the code and create those screens and get the performance that we're looking for. That's the value. And having that conversation with your UX folks, I would definitely, same thing.
Thanks.
It's not easy. You're going to find that when you invite your architects, they're going to want to decompose it into technical stories where your developers are. When you invite your QA, they're going to start thinking about terms of how am I going to test things. And when you invite UX, inevitably, they're going to start thinking about their role as it is applied. That's where the strong facilitator comes in, right? Is how do we all start thinking about where we are in that life cycle and what the outcome and the deliverable for that particular conversation is.
Any more questions, please, folk? Great conversation. Thank you. And great questions.
Yes.
Okay, let's make another round. Going once.
Quick question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Sasha,
Question don't have to be quick, please.
there's a question in the chat.
There's a lot of activities in the chat. I don't see a question.
I see it. It says, question, can the task and the story mapping have stickies that depend on other stickies?
Yes. It is absolutely possible. We can start looking to identify predecessors and successors, for sure.
That was Sherry C.
Yeah, and think about the timeline is chronological. So it's hard to get dressed. It's hard to take a shower if you haven't gotten out of your bed yet. So sometimes you just make obvious dependencies. And a really important thing is to think about it in terms of sequencing. I know we always talk about user stories being independent and minimizing those dependencies. But sometimes you just have a certain sequence you have to deliver work in. Well, and Carl, I think you said you had one question also.
Yeah. So some teams use PRDs, product requirement documents. Can there be like a conflict between? Have you seen instances where there's conflict between PRDs and these maps, or can they work hand in hand with each other?
So they can absolutely work hand in hand. The story mapping exercise should take place before we start creating PRDs, because again, it's about prioritization. I'm personally not a huge fan of PRDs, but I understand the value and why some organizations do. I want to make sure I am focused on the most important areas of my application first. So whatever was that MVP, those are the PRDs that I'm going to write first. Then I'm going to write my second release PRDs and then my third release PRDs. If you are in a situation where you have to write them all up front, then we just have a conflict because we're doing big upfront, planning now.
And what about let's say quarterly, let's say roadmap planning? How could this be used? Because sometimes you have maybe 10 plus features listed on the roadmap. How could this, do you have to do this exercise for all 10 plus items?
So hopefully there is a strategic initiative that's taking place, and those 10 features are not 10 randomly chosen features. Same thing, you're going to run the story mapping exercise because we have this new objective. As an outcome, we've identified features and stories that are going to need to be part of that planning process and forecasting process. So it informs us which features need to be ready and which stories need to be ready for that quarterly planning, as an example.
Okay, so
This
goes
is
back
really
to that part.
strategic in nature, far more than tactical. This is helping make sure that we all have shared understanding and a common goal that we're going after, and we understand how it plays together.
So prioritization definitely does help here.
Oh yeah, this helps inform that prioritization.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. These were all really, really good questions. I appreciated them all.
I see people are sharing their LinkedIn profile, so please take advantage if you want to extend your network. Great idea.
I have a question.
Paula has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Todd, for a wonderful presentation. Really enjoyed this and the activity as well about the story mapping. And I have a question regarding how far deep descriptive the user story should be. As you said, it should be brief enough that you get an idea what the story is all about. But, you know, how far, because we have to be specific to the point that it is understandable to the developer in order to build the right thing. How far deep can we go? Like, you know, how descriptive should it be? Like, I know we are following lean methods here, but how much can we go descriptive in this?
Right. So this is the exercise itself usually happens real times. So you don't have a lot of opportunity to go deep. This is initial thoughts. So if you're, and again, think about it in person. I'm just got a sticky note. However much detail I can fit on a sticky note and continue to make it easily readable is about the extent of the details you would go. I would be hesitant to go more than just a title that people understand. And this might be a little bit slightly off topic and slightly even controversial. At the end of the day, user stories are not written for developers. User stories are written for the organization so everyone understands the capabilities of the software that we're delivering. The tasks define the implementation plan, and that is very developer-centric. So if you are having a hard time writing stories because your developers don't understand the business domain, that should be a signal that you need to have a conversation with the team so that they understand how the application works and what drives the business and generates the revenue. So just, it's a very common problem that happens, right? We all want to live in our space where we feel most comfortable. When I was a developer, I promise you, I tried to channel every conversation to be as technical as possible because that is where I excelled at that time, right? And so that's just human nature. But really have conversations and help people understand that the goal, if you're doing story mapping at that point in time, the goal is to make sure everyone understands the users and their desires more so than how I'm going to build anything.
Oh, okay. I got it. I think I was kind of confusing between when you create a user story and then come up with, you know, description.
A refinement.
Yeah, refinement and as part of building the BRD, like,
Yep.
you know, yeah.
Yeah, this should be happening well before you've even committed to delivering anything. This is, you know, thinking it through and making sure we're about to build the right things. And every story you talk about in a story mapping will eventually become a full-fledged description and acceptance criteria and go through whatever process you guys have, you know, be it refinement, sprint planning, etc.
Right, because we do that as part of creating a PBI. We create a story and then from story, it builds into a descriptive, you know, understanding of what that problem is all about and then solving it and creating a DOD and acceptance criteria based off of that.
Yeah, so this is just much earlier in the process, just initial funding kind of thing.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Todd, building on this question from Apollo, would you consider this story mapping exercise to be a part of the product discovery or a part of the product delivery?
Discovery, 100%.
Yeah, feels like that.
Yes.
Well, if there is no more questions, thank you again, Todd, for a great presentation. Thank you, folks, for joining us tonight. And we are looking forward to see you in a month to join us for our next session. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Or the
Thank you,
rest
sir.
of your night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good job, Todd. Thanks.